some islands in the Caribbean, including Barbados, have been added to the green coronavirus travel list. From Wednesday morning, anyone arriving in the UK from those destinations will no longer have to quarantine at all. Following the announcement, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps has said that those who have had both vaccine doses could soon have the right to avoid quarantine when coming from other territories. But that will have to wait.
We see that there is a case for double vaccination, fully vaccinated, meaning that you perhaps don't have to quarantine. So we can take those countries in the amber list and allow people to come back without having to do the quarantine that you'd have to do for amber, but not yet, partly because, of course, not everybody has been offered a vaccine yet. And secondly, because the scientists are still working on the implications, for example, for children with the Joint Committee on Vaccines and Immunisation, yet to say how children should be treated through the vaccination programme. So there are a number of different questions which still need to be answered. But what we did want to do is let people know that this is something that we're actively looking at, but it won't be until later in the summer, and I'll be able to say more about it next month.
Transport Secretary Grant Shapps there speaking this evening after the government confirmed some small changes to its green list of territories for international travel. Julia Bue-Said is the Chief Executive of Advantage Travel Partnership, the UK's largest independent travel agent group. She was also one of the organisers of yesterday's Travel Day of Action protest in Westminster. Ms Bue-Said, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Hi, good evening, Ethan.
Indeed, good evening. Now, the travel industry has called for more to be done with regards to the destinations that have now been added to the green list. What more would you like to see?
I think the reality is when you start looking through the list, on the surface of it, it's positive. It's a bit more than the really two viable countries that we have on the list now, and therefore we feel very grateful. But you start to work through actually what does that mean for the British holidaymaker, and we've heard this evening. We're waiting for it to be confirmed, but we've seen on the Maltese Times that potentially that they will only allow Brits in if they've been vaccinated. Well, that changes the dynamics completely. So the problem you have is you have countries on the list, on the green list. You then have to look at what does that mean in terms of the countries you're going to and what restrictions they have in place. I think it's also worth pointing out when the Transport Secretary, when we finally got the information through from the Department of Transport, they reference a green watch list. And the idea of that is that they will tell us in advance, as they have tonight, which countries will be in that list. And therefore, that means there is a risk. Doesn't mean it will happen or it won't, but there is a risk that it may move to amber. So it's very difficult, to be very honest, to get very, very excited by this list. I think it's a step in the right direction. It gives us hope and we start to feel a little bit optimistic, but it's nowhere near enough to save the industry or save the summer.
And when you say save the industry, what is it in particular you're concerned about with regards to the industry itself? Is it jobs or is it the collapse of the industry? Is it something more severe?
It's all of that, to be perfectly honest. We've not traded. The industry really has not traded for 18 months. The industry is pretty vast. You've got lots of different businesses within that ecosystem. So a lot of the businesses that I represent are small family-run businesses. They've earned no income at all for 18 months now. They've not had the financial support in relation to how severe the restrictions on international travel have been, and we completely understand why they've been in place. They've not been allowed to trade. They're unable to trade their way through to recovery when mostly every other economic sector has had support to see its way through. The travel industry hasn't at all. So we are literally on a cliff edge. There was no summer last year, no winter season to sell, no summer Easter holidays to sell. A sector cannot survive. Businesses just cannot survive. With nothing at all to earn, and all the members are doing, all our businesses are doing, is actually refunding changes, cancelling amendments. It's a really, really tough time.
Well, and last question for you. Thank you again for joining us, Ms. Bue-Said. The uncertainty involved must also be a large factor here, because for the public to start booking their holidays, booking their flights, they would need to know, for example, as happened with Portugal, that at the last minute their plans aren't going to be changed on them without their awareness. That must also be a bit of a drag on the industry. What would you need to see for that certainty to come back, at least for the public, so that the industry itself is able to sell tickets, sell holiday destinations, and that the public will know that their tickets and their holidays aren't just going to be changed on them?
Yeah, no, but really good question. And certainty is a huge one. And we actually saw when Portugal moved off the list a few weeks back, the devastating impact it had on consumer confidence overnight was colossal. So confidence is a really big factor. What we need is a meaningful restart of travel, being grateful for having a few extra countries to sell. I mean, the world is a pretty big place and there's quite a lot of countries we can't sell to, is a real challenge. We know that it can restart safely. We know that there is a framework to enable that to happen. We want to see implemented with a bit of ambition now that we have been so successful with the vaccine deployment. And, other countries are catching up, but it's very complex. We absolutely believe that we can support the government in establishing even further the framework that's in place around the traffic light system and making that work so we can restart safely.
In fact, I think we've just inched ahead of Israel today on vaccinations. But Julia Bue-Said, thank you very much. Chief Executive of Advantage Travel Partnership, the UK's largest independent travel agent group, also one of the organisers of yesterday's Travel of Action protest in Westminster. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's get back